What's up, everyone? Pryon here today, and welcome to the first episode of Why Everyone Hates Dead by Daylight Edition. I've been thinking about starting a series like this for quite a while now, and there is an ample amount of hateable things in Dead by Daylight, so I would love to start today's series by talking about Chucky. Chucky has been in Dead by Daylight for, I would say, about a year now, probably a little over a year, and he has been one of the most contentious and controversial killers ever since his release. So, a little bit about myself. As a regular player of both sides, with about 3,000 hours on PC, we're going to take some time to explain some things about Chucky today. Now, it goes without saying that a lot of the most hardcore Chucky mains in Dead by Daylight are very upset about these recent changes. And here are those changes. Off the top of my head, I don't have them in front of me. The slice and dice speed was changed from 10 meters per second to 8. The duration of slice and dice was increased by 0.6 seconds, I believe, so he gets more total distance. And then the cooldown was increased from 12 seconds back to 16 seconds, what it was on release. So overall, huge nerfs for Chucky. He gets a little bit of a side upgrade with the duration, but he is much weaker now. And I have seen much complaining and screaming and baying from the Chucky mains that their killer has been murdered, he's C tier now, what are they going to do? And just a general lack of understanding for why survivors hate Chucky and why Chucky needed a nerf in the first place. So that is what the point of this series is going to be. We're going to go over things that are almost universally hated in Dead by Daylight, and we're going to explain why that is. So like I said, I play both sides for an extremely long amount of time in Dead by Daylight, so I feel like I'm pretty qualified to talk about this kind of thing, and I hope that you come to understand the same thing and agree with me throughout this video. So let's begin. When we talk about something that is disliked in Dead by Daylight, I propose a test. I have a little bit of background in law, and in law, they really like these things called factor tests. So that's what we're going to do here with Chucky and with every killer or any sort of survivor perk that we talk about in this series. We're going to have a 3-point factor test that determine a killer's quality as it relates to playing against them. Factor 1, clarity. Factor 2, survivor agency and counterplay. And factor 3 is the level of input required to get the output on this killer or perk or whatever it is we're talking about. So we're going to be putting Chucky through that today. Starting with factor 1, clarity. What this means is, how clear is it when Chucky is using his power? And when Chucky is using his power, do survivors know what's about to happen, what Chucky is going to do? So there are a lot of killers that have issues with clarity. Chucky is not one of them. Chucky scores perfect, nearly perfect marks here, which is totally unlike most of the hated killers in Dead by Daylight. His directional chuckling and little footsteps make it very clear that he's undetectable, and he is extremely loud when he channels and uses his dash. Contrast this with killers like Skull Merchant, who can seemingly just stand there and press buttons to affect drones on the map, which survivors have to read a book to figure out what they all do, and then they also have to know her add-ons because those have specific interactions with the drones, and the survivors get scanned and they don't really know what that means, and they can't really tell if she's getting faster or they're getting slower, and she knows where they are somehow, but the survivors can't really tell that because they don't know that she has this little PDA thing. Anyways, Singularity is another killer that has clarity issues. The whole ball and chain mechanic with his slipstream is completely unreadable unless you have an extreme sort of love for figuring out the unseen things in Dead by Daylight. You will never even know that the Singularity ball and chain thing exists unless you play against him a ton and deduce it on your own, or you watch content creators that delve into this kind of thing. So, clarity issues. How do the survivors actually know what is going on? And is it often that they just have no clue what's happening? With Chucky, that's not a problem. He's very simple, very simple to understand. He has great sound cues on his power. That's another big part of the clarity thing. You know, Wesker, he does his thing, and you know he's about to dash twice. Hillbilly, he pulls up the chainsaw. It's very loud. You know he's about to run very fast. So Chucky, he's completely fine in the clarity department. That's going to be the shortest one that we talk about today. So let's move on to number 2. Survivor agency. Do survivors feel like they have counterplay against Chucky? If they do have counterplay, is that counterplay fun and interesting? Before we talk about Chucky, let's talk about a killer that actually scores great marks in this category. Let's talk about the mastermind, Albert Wesker. We already said that he has great clarity, he does his little laugh, and you know that he's going to dash twice. But in the counterplay department, knowing what that guy is going to do, he's going to dash twice, maybe around a corner, gives the survivor a clear idea of what they can do to dodge it. They can either loop around more than one corner, so that he can't clear the corner with only 2 dashes, or they can flare out to dodge his second dash because Wesker's dashes are so fast that if you quickly flare out, he might just slide right past you. And that is extremely punishing to the mastermind, and it works a lot of the time. Now, the mastermind himself can adjust his aim to make sure that he hits where a survivor is going to dodge out to the right or left, but I digress. That counterplay is fun, it's interesting, it pays off for the survivor more often than not, and the killer can also counterplay it himself. So let's talk about Chucky instead. The survivor agency category is where Chucky falls off of a cliff. The hitbox of Slice and Dice is extremely large, especially when you compare it to other dashing hitboxes like Blight's Lethal Rush or Hillbilly's Chainsaw. Hillbilly's Chainsaw in particular is one of the smallest dashing hitboxes in Dead by Daylight, whereas Blight's Lethal Rush has 2 different hit modes, one where he holds down the button and kind of swings to the right or left, and another where he taps the hit button and then kind of strikes in a little circle around him but doesn't get any distance from it extra. Chucky's hitbox seems to be at least double the size of Blight's, and also extends greatly in front of him and a little bit to the sides when he lets go of the power button. Combine this with the fact that Chucky slides off of terrain like Oni does until he lets go of that power button during the Slice and Dice to activate the hitbox, you have an ability that leaves survivors feeling like there wasn't much they could do. And that's kind of a red flag in the survivor agency category. But wait, there's more. Experienced Chucky players know that they can use that terrain sliding mechanic to their advantage. They pre-turn their camera before activating Slice and Dice, so pre-turning the camera in this way allows them to predict survivor pathing, and when Chucky will come around a corner, facing exactly in the direction that a smart survivor would have been trying to corner up to dodge. So essentially, if the Chucky knows what they're doing, there's almost nothing you can do. You can't hide in the corner of the shack as he flies past you with Slice and Dice, because a good Chucky will just pre-turn his corner to that direction and come around the corner of shack by the lockers, already facing where you're hiding, for a free hit. So, to review, the skilled counterplay that works against killers like Blight, Oni, and Wesker simply does not work against a Chucky player that has done 5 minutes of research into how to play. Add in the fact that the Rat Poison add-on, which used to give a whopping 14 meters of aura reading all around Chucky every single time he dashed, you get a very unfun experience for survivors. With Rat Poison, which, be honest, 95% of Chucky players used every single game, the power essentially pilots itself once you figure out how to turn your camera. It's not an exaggeration to say that that add-on alone was giving multiple perk slots worth of aura reading per game for free. Add in the fact that pallet scamper bugs gave Chucky unpredictable and ridiculous looking hits. In particular, I'm talking about the pallet scamper bug that would have him immediately lunge forward in like a sort of multiple hit dash after coming out from under a pallet. And then you have his high speed at 10 meters per second combined with the giant hitbox. So the reason why the high speed is a problem, especially when you might be wondering, oh, but Demogorgon and Wesker, their dashes are way faster than Chucky's. The problem is, with Demogorgon and Wesker, they have to lock in to what they're aiming at when they press the button. Once they have pressed that button, they are aiming in that straight line, and they cannot adjust once their character is moving. Chucky can let go of the hip. He can let go to try to hit somebody that's doubling back into him. He can move himself all over the place to hit somebody that's dodging left or right, and his speed was 10 meters per second, which is almost as fast as Wesker's dash, which is at 14 meters per second. Demogorgon is the highest one up there with almost 20 meter per second dash, but he can get away with that because he's only got one of them. Anyways, the problem with that speed is that Chucky can adjust himself any way he wants during the dash, unlike Wesker and Demogorgon. So that high speed with the huge hitbox and being able to move himself all over the place means that Chucky can, not only can he just go past anybody that's body blocking by sliding off of them, means that only consistent counterplay against Chucky's slice and dice is dead hard. Dead hard and pre-dropping pallets. You do not have time to react against a 10 meter per second dash where the killer can adjust left and right, unless you've pre-dropped pallets and you have dead hard to use. Dead hard was the only consistent counterplay against pre-nerf slice and dice. But wait, there's more. Chucky's tiny size and different red light placement means that it is extremely difficult to see him at small loops. Playing small loops, which are not safe, is one of the most fun parts of the game for survivors. You have to react split second to things like the killer changing directions and doubling back or using their power. With Chucky, this gameplay is just completely taken away from survivors and replaced with being unable to see him double back and just dying instead. It doesn't exactly feel fair or fun to a survivor that they can't loop a 110 speed killer at a pallet and have to just pre-drop them instead because the killer is 2 feet tall and often has no red light. Imagine one of those filler pallets on Macmillan or Autohaven. You like to greed those pallets because it creates a fun mind game where you have to instantly react to the killer doubling back, and if you don't react fast enough, you probably die. With Chucky, it's almost impossible to react when Chucky doubles back because he's often completely out of your view because he's too short. So instead, it creates a scenario where you have to just pre-drop that pallet, and that's not fun, and it leads to unfun scenarios for survivors. So let's circle back to the second part of that agency question. There is counterplay for Chucky, but is it intuitive? Is it fun? Is it interesting? Categorically, no. The counterplay for pre-nerf Chucky was not fun or interesting in any way. The only consistent counterplay to stay alive against pre-nerf Chucky was to pre-drop every single pallet you came across and then use dead hard when he inevitably zoned you into a free hit. Everything else was simply not viable or boiled down to hoping that Chucky missed. Hoping that the killer misses is not counterplay, and it's not good killer design. The cooldown of his power was also a huge problem. Sitting at only 12 seconds for a while, or even less with the power drill add-on, you would open chase with a seemingly undodgeable hit from an undetectable killer that you didn't know where he was because he has full vision on you at all times with rat poison. Power essentially plays itself, and then you'd have another one of those hits ready before the survivor could even make it to a different loop. Now, the speed nerf for Chucky creates more situations where survivors feel like they actually have agency and time to dodge slice and dice. The level of input required is the third factor here, and it's another thing that works against Chucky. When a survivor goes down in Dead by Daylight, a lot of times they unconsciously ask themselves this question: what did the killer do to outplay me? This is very important for the way that things are perceived in a game of Dead by Daylight. When you're playing against somebody like the Huntress, or the Mastermind, or the Hillbilly, and you go down, the survivor thinks, what did the killer do to outplay me? With Huntress, it's usually something like, wow, that was a great shot. Or with the Mastermind, it's like, wow, he hit a crazy hug check. That looked really cool. He got me. With the Hillbilly, he might have hit an awesome curve, or I just wasn't paying attention and he cross-mapped me. That was pretty cool. But with Chucky is extremely easy to play, and he was a top 6 killer before the nerfs. Now, the top 5 killers here would have been Hillbilly, Blight, Nurse, Dracula, and Spirit. Each of these killers are hard in their own way. Nurse requires you to learn how to play a whole different game. I mean, she's probably the easiest out of these killers, but she still requires some skill and practice to pick up. Blight has to hit a series of very frame intensive inputs at a nice rhythm while actually aiming himself to not bounce off of the wrong things and get you with bump logic. Hillbilly, you are not going to hit anything if you don't know how to play Hillbilly and haven't mastered Overdrive and how to do the turning window on curves, etc. Dracula is kind of a jack of all trades, but his two chase powers are kind of just worse versions of other killers, which would be Wesker and Pyramid Head with Hellfire and Wolf form. And they actually have more conditions that make them harder to use than those two. Dracula is strong because he has them at the same time, but there's so much things that you can mess up with Dracula, and you can just tell when you're playing against a bad Dracula. It's not easy to use Wolf form. It's not easy to know what kind of things Hellfire will and won't go over. It's not easy to get perfect value out of your Bat form and know exactly how to track survivors when you can't see them. And that's not even mentioning how difficult Spirit is right now. After all of her nerfs, with all of her audio bugs, it's pretty difficult to play her as a 110 killer that has a very long power cooldown and can be screwed over by everything from audio bugs to silent flashbangs. Anyways, how does this relate to Chucky? With Chucky, all you have to have is basic M1 killer mechanics to play a killer that can't be seen at short loops and can actually just sit behind corners on third person and wait for survivors to mind game themselves. And then aside from that, all you have to learn is to pre-turn your camera in the way that a survivor is going to dodge, and bam, you've got a top 6 killer, a pseudo S tier that just gets a free hit every 12 seconds. Yes, there are good Chucky mains out there that go and do these crazy scamper combo slice and dice hits, but those aren't practical. They don't apply in 95% of games, and yeah, they sometimes get you hits, and they do look cool, but those scenarios are just not applicable to the general gameplay of Chucky. The general gameplay loop of Chucky is that he just gets to bypass the whole M1 mind game thing that every other killer has to deal with, and then he zones you into an undodgeable slice and dice hit, which is too fast to react to unless you have Dead Hard, and is honestly rat poison on 95% of Chucky players. You can't hide from it. You can't corner up, and if the Chucky has his monitor on, you're not cornering up because he's going to pre-turn his camera on you and just go directly to you with rat poison. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that this is why survivors hate Chucky. He's a killer that does not require even half of the input that most of the hardest killers in this game do. You can just pick him up and suddenly be a top 6 killer in the game, and be downing survivors that are much, much better than you, just by virtue of how Chucky's power works. I'm saying that while his clarity is good, the survivor agency against him is sorely lacking. Survivors do not feel like the Chucky actually did anything hard or impressive to outplay them when they go down against Chucky. And generally, before the nerf, the counterplay to Chucky was extremely boring, linear, and totally uninteresting. It's essentially boiled down to pre-drop pallet, hope that you have Dead Hard, and pray that the Chucky misses. So, in general, these factors, clarity, survivor agency and counterplay, and the level of input, they are greatly working against Chucky, and it explains why he is so hated in Dead by Daylight and why he got nerfed in the first place. So let's review before I finish this video. Clarity. Chucky scores an A+ there. We already mentioned that. Survivor agency and counterplay. The counterplay is uninteresting and unintuitive and boring, and the survivor agency is next to none against pre-nerf Chucky. That is assuming that the Chucky has his monitor on and has done more than 5 minutes of research about how to turn his camera before using slice and dice. And lastly, the level of input required, not even close to that of the other strong killers in the game, like Blight and Billy and Spirit and Dracula and Nurse. Chucky is just... he was essentially a cheat code for mediocre killer players to beat survivors that are much better than themselves. And I think that's why we're seeing so much anger at Chucky being nerfed. He's down to his rightful place now, as he should be, as a 110 speed killer. I mean, he's still going to be really annoying at loops, but the changes to Slice and Dice are going to put him back in line where he belongs. And yeah, that's the first episode of Why Everyone Hates. I kind of ran out of things to talk about in the end, had to do a little bit of review there. But if you enjoyed this type of thing, I have some other ideas already, so leave me a comment down below, and let me know if you enjoyed the video.